The morning light spilled across Charleston like liquid gold. Spanish moss draped from ancient oaks, the faint smell of salt from the Ashley River mingled with the sweetness of magnolias, and horse-drawn carriages creaked lazily over cobblestones. Inside a small, white-painted home just 3 blocks from the river, the world smelled of butter, flour, and vanilla. In her kitchen, Eleanor Hayes bent over an oven tray, sliding out a batch of golden biscuits. She was 72 years old, her hair silver and pulled neatly into a bun, but her movements still carried a brisk determination. The lace curtains above the sink fluttered gently with the morning breeze, scattering sunlight across the counters dusted in flour. She wiped her brow, smiled faintly, and whispered aloud to herself, 1 week, just 1 week until the big day, her son's wedding. Those words filled her with a cocktail of joy and nerves. After years of widowhood and quiet evenings alone, Eleanor had poured her entire soul into making sure Daniel's second marriage would be perfect. A mother's dedication. Her spiral notebook lay open on the dining table, scrawled with lists: pounds of shrimp, cartons of cream, sacks of sugar, gallons of sweet tea, all carefully calculated to feed 150 guests. Sticky notes with prices fluttered like tiny flags. She had already spent nearly $3,000 money drawn from her retirement fund. But she didn't think of it as a loss. It's an investment in love, she told herself. There would be shrimp and grits, cornbread casserole, roast beef with rosemary, fried chicken hot from the oil, macaroni pie bubbling with cheese, collard greens seasoned the way her mother used to make them. And the desserts: banana pudding, pecan pies, coconut cake, peach cobbler. The menu was a love letter to the South, to family, to memory itself. She had also volunteered to decorate the reception hall at the Riverside Hotel: white roses and magnolia leaves, crystal glass jars with floating candles, lace runners she had sewn herself. Somewhere in between the chopping and the sewing, she had coordinated with vendors: the band, the photographer, the rental company for tables and chairs. She had created spreadsheets as if she were 20 again, not 72. This is what mothers do, she thought. We make everything possible, even if no one sees the work behind it. Conversations with the past. As she worked, her mind drifted to her late husband, George. He had been gone for over 2 decades, but in moments like these, she still felt him in the room. She imagined him leaning against the kitchen doorway, grinning, arms crossed. "Ellie," he would tease, "you're going to run yourself ragged. You can't carry the whole world." And she, without looking up from her pots, would reply, "Maybe not the whole world, just my family." Her eyes fell on a framed photograph above the sink. George in his Navy uniform, young and strong, holding baby Daniel in his arms. She touched the glass with flour-dusted fingers. "George, our boy is getting married again. He found love after all. You'd be proud." Daniel's call. The phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her reverie. She wiped her hands and answered. "Hey, Mom." Daniel's voice came through, brisk and busy. He was always busy. "How's everything coming along?" "Perfect, sweetheart," Eleanor said, trying to mask the ache in her shoulders. "The buffet is going to be wonderful. I'll start the desserts tomorrow." "You're incredible," Daniel replied, his tone distracted as though reading an email at the same time. "Madison and I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Eleanor said softly. "This is my gift, a mother's gift." He chuckled. "Well, it's the best gift anyone could give. You're making this the best day of my life." Her heart swelled. "That's all I want, Daniel." They hung up. Eleanor stood there, staring at the quiet phone. At 72, she thought she had already given all she could. But perhaps, she thought with a faint smile, perhaps this wedding was proof she still had something left to offer. The weight of legacy. Later that afternoon, Eleanor opened her old photo albums. Daniel at 5 years old, sitting cross-legged in the backyard with a popsicle dripping down his chin. Daniel at 12, proudly holding up a fishing pole beside George. Daniel at 18 in his graduation cap, his grin wide, his arms slung around her shoulders. Each page was a reminder of why she was doing all this. Daniel's first marriage had ended in tragedy. Claire, his high school sweetheart, had died in a car accident just a year after their vows. Eleanor remembered the night Daniel showed up on her porch, pale and broken, collapsing into her arms like a boy again. For years afterward, he had lived like a shadow, polite but hollow, drifting through work and routine. Eleanor had prayed night after night, begging God to send him someone who would bring back his smile. And then Madison appeared. She was younger than Claire had been, confident, ambitious, always dressed with precision. At first, Eleanor worried Daniel was rushing into something, but Madison won her over quickly. She brought flowers, called her Mom Eleanor, offered to help wash dishes. She complimented Eleanor's cooking with such sweetness that the older woman felt her chest ache with warmth. At last, Eleanor thought at the time, a daughter I never had. Charleston in summer. Outside, Charleston itself buzzed with the rhythm of wedding season. On King Street, bridal boutiques displayed gowns in glass windows. Along the Battery, couples posed for engagement photos, the harbor breeze lifting their hair. Tourists licked ice cream cones in the shade while bands played jazz on street corners. Eleanor loved this city, its pastel houses with wrought iron balconies, its cobblestone alleys, its churches that tolled bells on Sunday mornings. She wanted Daniel's wedding to honor Charleston's grace, to show that the Hayes family belonged in its tapestry of tradition. Weddings here weren't just personal, they were a stage for family pride, and Eleanor wanted no whispers of pity, no quiet judgments, only admiration. Evening solitude. By nightfall, Eleanor's kitchen looked like a battlefield of baking. Cooling racks of cookies lined the counters, trays of biscuits stacked high, bowls soaking in sudsy water. She rubbed her aching shoulders, poured herself a tall glass of sweet tea, and sank into the chair by the window. Outside, cicadas droned their summer song. Fireflies winked over the gardenias in the yard. Somewhere in the distance, the river caught the last light of day, glinting like molten copper. Eleanor allowed herself a moment of stillness. She imagined Daniel and Madison sitting together, reviewing seating charts, planning a life. She pictured the reception hall glowing with candles, Madison radiant in lace, Daniel's eyes alight with joy. And herself, standing at the edge, not center stage but close enough to see the fruits of her labor. Her chest swelled with that familiar maternal ache, joy tangled with exhaustion, pride woven with sacrifice. She whispered to the darkened kitchen, "George, I wish you could see him. You'd be proud." The words Eleanor Hayes overheard on that hot Charleston afternoon didn't just sting, they sliced. They dug beneath her skin and lodged in her chest like shards of glass. Daniel's mom will watch all 15 kids. She won't even realize we're using her. The lace curtain slipped from her fingers. For a moment, she thought her knees might give way. At 72, Eleanor had known grief, her husband's cancer, her daughter's miscarriage, the endless small losses of age. But humiliation? Humiliation was something different. She leaned against the counter, her flower-streaked apron rising and falling with each shallow breath. She could hear the patio still alive with laughter. Madison's voice, syrupy, melodic, had shed its usual warmth, revealing a metallic edge that Eleanor had never once suspected. A second voice, sharp as a cracked bell, rang out. "That's rich, Maddie. The old lady running around chasing kids while you sip champagne? Genius." Eleanor's stomach turned. Old lady. The sound of shattered glass. Her kitchen, moments earlier filled with the gentle rhythm of baking, felt suddenly hostile. The tick of the wall clock, the hiss of the oven, the faint hum of cicadas outside, every sound seemed magnified, mocking. She clutched the counter as her world tilted. Her spiral notebook of menus and schedules lay open on the table, its neat handwriting blurring through her tears. She'd written those lists late into the night, candlelight spilling across the page as she calculated portions, balanced her meager budget, and reminded herself, it's for love. It's for Daniel. Now each line looked like a cruel joke, a mother's gift turned burden. Her eyes darted to the jars of preserves lined neatly on the shelf. She'd been saving them for the dessert table, peach jam, fig compote, blackberry preserves. Each jar had been hours of work under the summer heat. She imagined guests spreading them on biscuits, Daniel grinning with pride, Madison thanking her in front of everyone. But that fantasy cracked. In its place came the image of herself stuck in a corner of the reception hall, hem of her dress tugged by toddlers, sweat dripping down her temples, while the real guests feasted on the buffet she had slaved to create. She saw it too clearly, Madison's polished smile as she twirled on the dance floor, whispering to friends, "It's fine, Daniel's mom is handling the kids. She loves it." The humiliation burned hotter. A lifetime of sacrifice. Eleanor pulled herself into a chair and pressed her palms flat against the wooden table. Her gaze landed on the framed photograph hanging above the mantel, George in his navy blues, holding baby Daniel, their faces both round with youth. She closed her eyes and let memories flood her. Daniel at 6, bringing her dandelions from the yard, whispering, "For you, Mama." Daniel at 15, head bowed over his books, muttering that he didn't need help but secretly grateful for her hovering presence. Daniel at 22, standing in a rented tuxedo beside Claire, his first bride, eyes shining with love Eleanor thought might never dim. When Claire's life had ended on a rain-slick road, Eleanor had gathered her broken son into her arms. She'd fed him, reminded him to breathe, forced him to keep going when grief hollowed him out. Every fiber of her life had been stitched around him. His happiness had been her compass, his sorrow her burden. And now he was ready to let Madison, that girl, turn her into little more than a babysitter. The mask returns. The sound of footsteps outside snapped her back. Daniel's voice drifted through the open window, cheerful, unsuspecting. "What are my girls laughing about?" Madison's reply came smooth as honey. "Oh, just talking about how organized I am. Everything's under control. Your mom will keep the kids busy so nothing interrupts." Eleanor pressed her fist to her mouth. Daniel chuckled. "My mom is an angel. She always helps." "Yes," Madison said, softer now but dripping with sarcasm. "Very convenient to have a mother-in-law like that." Eleanor's hands clenched until her nails dug crescents into her palms. Daniel didn't catch it. He never caught the undertones. Retreat to the bedroom. When the laughter faded and the sound of footsteps receded, Eleanor climbed the stairs as if her legs were made of stone. Each creak of the wooden steps seemed to echo her shame. Her bedroom welcomed her with familiar stillness, the quilt, faded but neat, the smell of lavender sachets in the drawers, photographs on the nightstand, Daniel's graduation, George's retirement party, vacations at Myrtle Beach, her life cataloged in snapshots, every one of them a reminder of how much she had given. She sat heavily on the bed, staring at the ceiling until her eyes burned. All those years of sacrifice. For this? For laughter at my expense? The tangle of emotions. Humiliation gave way to grief, grief to anger, anger to something colder, resolve. She whispered aloud to the empty room, "Not me, not anymore." Her voice startled her. It was the voice of someone who had been silent too long, someone who had always said yes, who had bent herself into shapes to keep peace, to make life easier for others. But beneath the weight of 72 years, a fire still burned. 3 days of silence. The days that followed stretched taut. Eleanor went about her work as if nothing had happened. She kneaded dough, chopped onions, packed trays, all while her mind replayed every cruel word. When Daniel called, her voice remained steady. "Yes, sweetheart, everything's fine. The buffet will be perfect." But inside, she was rehearsing a new script, one where she wasn't the help, one where she reclaimed her dignity. A call to Loretta. On Wednesday morning, Eleanor stood at the kitchen phone, twisting the cord around her fingers. Her stomach fluttered as she dialed a number she knew by heart. "Lo?" The voice on the other end was brisk, familiar. "Eleanor? You sound fired up. What's going on?" Eleanor hesitated, then spilled everything. The overheard conversation, the mocking laughter, the humiliation that clung to her like smoke. Silence hummed on the line. Then Loretta exhaled sharply. "Ellie Hayes, that girl's got venom in her veins, and Daniel, bless his heart, is blind." "I know," Eleanor said, her throat tight, "but I won't let them use me, not this time." "What are you thinking?" Eleanor's voice steadied. "I have a plan." By late morning on Saturday, the wedding day, Charleston pulsed with summer heat, the bells of street. Michaels tolled noon, their chimes scattering over cobblestone streets where carriages carried tourists and children licked ice cream cones. At the Riverside Hotel, the reception hall glittered with string lights, white tablecloths, and a nervous energy that should have been joy but instead trembled on the edge of panic. Daniel Hayes stood in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear. His tuxedo collar was already damp with sweat. "Mom? Mom? Where are you?" His voice cracked against the din of bustling guests. "Please answer." The line rang out to silence. Behind him, Madison wrung her manicured hands. Her veil had been pinned hours earlier, but strands of hair were already slipping from the bun. Her lipstick looked too bright against her pale skin. "She can't do this. She can't just Daniel. The caterers are asking where to unload. The florist is saying no flowers. The staff says there's no buffet. What are we supposed to tell people?" Daniel turned on her with an edge she hadn't heard before. "You said Mom had it under control." "I thought she did," Madison snapped, then immediately softened her tone when two bridesmaids glanced over. "Baby, it's just a mix-up. Maybe she's late." But inside, panic clawed at her chest. She had read the letter already, discovered it lying neatly on Eleanor's kitchen table when she and Daniel had stopped by that morning to pick up trays. She hadn't dared to show it to him yet. The letter revealed. Daniel's phone buzzed with a new message. He glanced down, expecting Eleanor's name. Instead, it was Madison's sister, Audrey, already at the hotel. "Where's the food? Parents are asking who's supposed to watch their kids. This is chaos." Daniel rubbed his temples. "What's going on? Why are people asking about babysitting? Why are they saying Mom was supposed to—" Madison's face blanched. She opened her clutch and pulled out the folded letter, her hand trembling. "Daniel, I didn't want to show you this until after the ceremony, but—" He snatched it from her and read. His eyes darted across the page, his jaw tightening with each line. By the time he reached the words, "With love, but with dignity, Mom," his hands shook. "Cancel everything? No buffet?" His voice was hoarse. "What the hell did you two say to her?" Madison swallowed hard. "It was just a joke, Daniel. She overheard me and Audrey. We didn't mean it." "A joke?" His voice rose, catching the attention of groomsmen adjusting their ties nearby. "You turned my mother into a babysitter in front of strangers and you called it a joke?" "Daniel, please, not here." But it was too late. The chaos had already begun. Chaos in the hall. By 2 o'clock, guests had begun arriving. Children in frilly dresses and clip-on bow ties darted through the lobby, their parents glancing around expectantly. "Excuse me," one mother said sharply to Daniel. "Who's in charge of childcare? We were told your mother would be watching the little ones." Daniel's throat constricted. He had no answer. Another parent chimed in, frustrated. "Our kids are running wild. This was supposed to be handled." Meanwhile, the buffet tables stood empty, except for pitchers of water. The smell of pizza boxes hurriedly ordered in desperation began to fill the air. Guests muttered, fanned themselves with programs, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The elegant Charleston wedding that was meant to sparkle with charm now sagged under the weight of unmet expectations. And at its center, Daniel felt the crushing realization: Mom was right. She was being used. Meanwhile, at the spa, 2 hours away, Eleanor Hayes sat in a plush white robe, her eyes closed as a masseuse's hands pressed warm stones along her shoulders. The sound of a fountain trickled nearby, mingling with the soft strains of instrumental music. For the first time in decades, Eleanor's body relaxed without the burden of duty pressing into her bones. She inhaled deeply, the scent of lavender filling her lungs. Her phone, face down on the table, buzzed and buzzed and buzzed. 17 missed calls, dozens of messages. She ignored them all. Loretta sipped white wine from a stemmed glass and gave her a thumbs up. "How does it feel, Ellie?" Eleanor smiled faintly, her eyes still closed. "Like I've finally remembered who I am." The calls grow desperate. When she finally flipped her phone over, curiosity getting the better of her, she saw message after message stacked like bricks. Daniel. "Mom, please call me. Everyone's asking where the food is." Daniel. "We're ordering pizza. This is humiliating." Daniel. "Madison's crying. Please just come back and fix this." Daniel. "I found your letter. Why are you doing this to me?" And then, the last one, his voice practically audible through the words. "Daniel, There are 15 kids here. Parents are furious. Mom, I need you. Eleanor exhaled slowly, her chest tightening. For a moment she almost gave in, almost picked up the phone, almost offered to drive back, to rescue her son from the chaos. But then Madison's laughter replayed in her mind. She won't even realize we're using her. Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. She pressed the power button and turned the phone off. The breaking point. Back at the hotel, Daniel's hands shook as he set his phone down. Madison hovered beside him, her mascara smudging at the corners of her eyes. "This is your fault," he said quietly. She blinked, stunned. "Mine? My mother spent months preparing for us. She gave us her savings, her time, her energy, and you made her feel like hired help." Tears welled in Madison's eyes. "Daniel, I didn't mean—" But his glare cut her off. "You laughed at her, you mocked her, and now she's gone." The silence between them was louder than the murmurs of restless guests. Eleanor's reflection. At dinner, Eleanor and Loretta dined on roasted salmon and heirloom vegetables, served on porcelain plates by smiling staff. The wine glasses sparkled in the setting sun, the lake outside shimmering like gold. Loretta leaned across the table. "You think Daniel's tearing his hair out right now?" Eleanor chuckled softly. "I think Madison's mask has finally slipped, and Daniel needed to see it. Do you feel guilty?" Eleanor paused, setting her fork down. "Yes, but guilt doesn't mean I was wrong. It just means I'm still a mother." The text glowed on the phone like a curse carved into glass. "Madison, if you don't come tomorrow, you'll lose your son. He'll never forgive you. Think carefully, Eleanor." Eleanor Hayes sat motionless on the edge of her bed in the spa suite. The robe she wore still held the faint scent of lavender oil from the massage, but its comfort had vanished. The instant that message arrived, the lake outside gleamed under moonlight, tranquil and vast. Inside, her world shrank to those 12 words. Her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. "Delete it," part of her whispered. "Pretend it never came." But another part, the part that had raised Daniel alone, the part that had buried George with dignity, forced her to keep reading those words until they burned into memory. "Lose your son." The phrase cut deeper than any insult. More than being called old lady, more than being reduced to a free nanny, this threat pierced her very marrow. Daniel was the only family she had left. Memory of love. Her mind betrayed her with memories. Daniel at 7 running across the backyard with a paper crown he had made himself, shouting, "Mom, I'm the king and you're the queen." Daniel at 12, breaking down after a fight at school, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mom." Daniel at 25, clinging to her hand at George's funeral, his face streaked with tears. Every scene, every echo reminded her of a truth Madison wanted to twist. Daniel needed her, and she needed him. Could a single wedding and a woman with a pretty smile and sharp tongue destroy that bond? She pressed her palms against her eyes, whispering, "George, give me strength, tell me what to do." Loretta's entrance. The door opened softly. Loretta stepped in, a towel slung around her shoulders. Her eyes immediately locked on Eleanor's pale face. "Ellie? What happened?" Wordlessly, Eleanor handed her the phone. Loretta read, her brows knitting into a fierce line. "That little viper," Loretta hissed. "She's not just ungrateful, she's dangerous." "She's threatening me with Daniel," Eleanor whispered, "and that's the one thing I can't fight against." Loretta sat beside her, gripping her hand. "Listen, Daniel loves you. That girl is trying to wedge herself between you two because she knows love is your weakness. But respect, Ellie, that's your strength. Don't bend now." Eleanor stared at the phone again, torn. What if Madison's right? What if he never forgives me? Loretta's voice softened but remained firm. "Then you'll know he was lost long before this." "But I don't believe that. He's confused, hurt, but he'll see through her if you stand your ground." Eleanor swallowed, letting the words anchor her, yet doubt coiled tight in her chest. At the hotel, while Eleanor wrestled with silence, the reception back in Charleston unraveled. The grand ballroom of the historic Harborview Hotel had been meant for elegance. Instead, it stank of tomato sauce and grease, boxes of pizza-covered linen-clad tables. Children shrieked as they darted between chairs, knocking over soda cups. Guests whispered behind raised hands, Where's the buffet? Where's Eleanor? Daniel sat slumped on a bench outside the ballroom, his bow tie undone, his shirt clinging with sweat. His hands covered his face. Madison approached, her heels tapping sharply against the marble. She lowered herself beside him, adjusting her gown to look composed. "Daniel," she cooed, "we can't let this ruin us. People will forget. It's just a bump in the road." He turned to her, his eyes hollow. "My mother gave everything for this wedding, and you laughed at her." Her lashes fluttered. "It was a careless remark. You're blowing it out of proportion." Daniel's voice rose. "Proportion? She spent her savings. She worked for months, and you turned her into a servant." Madison forced tears into her eyes, but anger simmered beneath. "Daniel, she's manipulating you. She always has to be the center. If you don't set boundaries, she'll run our marriage. This was her way of punishing us." Daniel pressed his fists against his knees, torn between fury and despair. For the first time, the future he had envisioned with Madison looked fragile, as if it could collapse with one more gust of truth. The phone call. Near midnight, Eleanor's phone rang again. Madison's name pulsed on the screen. "Don't answer," Loretta muttered, flipping through her book. But Eleanor's thumb betrayed her. She needed to hear. She swiped. "Eleanor?" Madison's voice was syrup-sweet at first. "I didn't mean for you to overhear that. Audrey and I were joking. You misunderstood." "I heard exactly what you said," Eleanor replied, her tone even. Madison chuckled nervously. "You're overreacting. You've always wanted to help. We thought you'd enjoy it." Enjoy being mocked? Enjoy being used? At 72, after raising Daniel alone, after burying my husband, I'm reduced to your free babysitter? The veneer cracked. Madison's voice sharpened. "Daniel is furious. He's humiliated. If you care about him, you'll come back tomorrow. Otherwise..." "Otherwise what?" Eleanor interrupted. "Otherwise you'll lose him." For a heartbeat, Eleanor's breath caught. Then she steadied herself, speaking with quiet steel. "If my son abandons me because I refuse to be your servant, then he was never truly mine to begin with." She ended the call. Loretta exhaled, wide-eyed. "Well, you just drew the battle line." Night of reflection. Sleep refused Eleanor. She lay staring at the ceiling, shadows stretching like accusing fingers. Every creak in the wooden beams reminded her of home. She imagined Daniel's face, torn and weary. The ache in her chest deepened. But then she saw Madison's smirk, her callous laughter, and anger rekindled. "George," she whispered into the darkness, "help me hold steady, because tomorrow everything may shatter." Morning resolve. At dawn, Eleanor sat on the balcony overlooking the lake, coffee steaming in her hands. The horizon glowed pink and gold, but her thoughts churned gray. She felt fragile, like glass thinned by years, yet also unyielding, like the granite stones beneath the water. Loretta joined her, carrying 2 croissants. "Sleep?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, but I've made peace with it. I won't crawl back, not even for Daniel." Loretta squeezed her shoulder. "That's the Eleanor I know." Meanwhile, Madison's countermove. Back in Charleston, Madison wasn't sleeping either. She sat in her father's study, mascara smeared, her voice trembling as she pleaded into the phone. "Pastor Whitmore, please, you have to help me. Eleanor's ruining everything. She humiliated us, abandoned us in front of everyone. She needs guidance." The pastor's voice was cautious. "Marriage is sacred, Madison. Families must unite, not divide." "That's just it," she pressed, tears thickening her tone. "She's refusing to unite. She wants to control Daniel forever. If the church doesn't step in, I'll lose my marriage before it begins." She let silence hang, knowing pity often filled the void. At last, the pastor sighed. "Very well, I'll reach out to her. Perhaps I can mediate." A smile flickered across Madison's face, small but triumphant. Resolution. Transition. By mid-morning, Eleanor's phone buzzed again. This time, not Madison, not Daniel. A new number. She hesitated, then opened the message. Unknown. "Mrs. Hayes? This is Pastor Whitmore from St. Andrews. I need to speak with you urgently. Madison has come to me with concerns that affect you directly." Eleanor's breath caught. The coffee cup trembled in her hands. Loretta, she whispered, showing her the screen. She's dragging the church into this. Loretta's jaw tightened. She's not stopping with Daniel. She's going to try to ruin your name and the whole community. Eleanor stared at the message, the morning sun suddenly too bright, too merciless. She whispered, almost to herself, "What has she told them?" Cliffhanger. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. "Daniel, Mom, please, whatever you do, don't meet with the pastor until we talk. There's something you need to know about Madison." Her pulse raced. Something she needed to know? What secret was Daniel finally ready to reveal, and would it come in time to save their bond? The letter sat heavy in Eleanor Hayes' lap, its words carved into church stationery like a verdict. "Concerns have been raised about your role in the unity of Daniel and Madison's marriage." The script was elegant, the ink a calm black, but beneath it she heard Madison's voice, sly and triumphant. "She's divisive. She doesn't support us. She abandoned her son on his wedding day." Outside, Charleston's streets bustled with Sunday ease. Neighbors clipped hedges, children rode bikes, church bells chimed. But inside Eleanor's kitchen, the world had shifted. Reputation was currency here, and Madison had just declared Eleanor bankrupt. Loretta slapped the letter down with a scoff. "Concerns, my foot. That girl spun this whole story to look like the sainted bride abandoned by a bitter old mother-in-law. She's poison, Ellie, and now she's dripping it into the well everyone drinks from." Eleanor stared at the letter, her chest tightening. "In Charleston, once the church questions you, the whole town follows. I've seen widows shunned for less, a woman's reputation here." She trailed off, swallowing the ache. "Isn't worth sacrificing your dignity," Loretta finished firmly. But Eleanor wasn't so sure. The weight of whispers. By the next morning, the whispers had begun. At the grocery store, two women she'd known for years hushed their conversation when she entered the produce aisle. She could still hear fragments. "Walked out. Ruined the wedding. Poor Madison." At the gas station, an acquaintance avoided eye contact, muttering, "Such a shame about the reception. Folks are talking." Even her next-door neighbor leaned over the fence that afternoon. "Eleanor," he said awkwardly, "did you really, leave them stranded like that?" Each word was a needle. She wanted to shout, "I cooked, I planned, I paid, I was mocked like a servant." But she only nodded politely and retreated inside, her pride both shield and prison. Loretta sat across from her at the kitchen table that evening, sipping tea. "This is exactly what Madison wants, to turn your silence into guilt. If you hide, they'll believe her. If you fight, they'll say you're bitter. She's cornering you either way." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her mug. "So, what do I do? Meet with Pastor Whitmore and defend myself like a criminal?" Loretta leaned forward. "Not a criminal, Ellie. A witness. You tell him the truth, every word of it, and let him decide whose story holds." Daniel's fracture. Meanwhile, Daniel paced the dim parking lot behind the Harborview Hotel. The wedding may have ended, but the chaos lingered. Pizza boxes overflowed trash bins. Children's footprints stained the marble floors, and the memory of whispers clung like cobwebs. Madison had spent the night sobbing into a hotel pillow, alternating between fury at Eleanor and despair for herself. Daniel had tried to comfort her, but the gnawing voice inside him would not quiet. "She mocked my mother. She used her." He remembered nights months earlier when Madison had insisted Eleanor's house felt cluttered and suggested redecorating. He remembered her rolling her eyes at Eleanor's stories, muttering, "She just wants attention." He had brushed it off then, telling himself Madison was nervous, young, adjusting. But now, the facade cracked. He pulled his phone and typed, "Mom, don't meet with the pastor until we talk. There's something you need to know about Madison." His thumb hovered, then he hit send. For the first time in weeks, he felt the faintest flicker of relief. The pastor's office. When Eleanor entered Street Andrews the next day, the sanctuary no longer felt like refuge. The stained glass glowed with morning light, but whispers swirled in the foyer like gnats. Pastor Whitmore welcomed her into his office, his kind face lined with unease. "Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming." Eleanor sat, back straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I received your letter. I thought it best to face this directly. He nodded, then sighed. I've heard many versions of what happened at the wedding. Madison says you abandoned them at the last moment, leaving guests without food, children without supervision. She feels wounded, and she believes you acted out of spite. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Spite? I spent months planning that wedding. I drained my savings. I offered it all as love. And then I overheard her mocking me, calling me free labor, a nuisance to keep out of the way. I refused to be humiliated. That's all. Whitmore tapped his fingers against his Bible. Marriage is fragile in its beginnings. Unity must be protected. Sometimes sacrifice is required. Sacrifice? Eleanor leaned forward, eyes blazing. Pastor, I sacrificed for 30 years as a wife and 20 more as a mother. I sacrificed my sleep, my savings, my dignity. And now you ask me to sacrifice respect too? Tell me, when does love stop being sacrifice and start being slavery? The pastor's eyes flickered. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Then he said gently, I hear your pain. But Madison feels equally wounded. Wounded? Eleanor's voice trembled. She wanted me invisible. She wanted me working in the shadows while she smiled in the spotlight. If that's unity, Pastor, it's unity built on my back. The aftermath. When she left the office, heads turned in the hallway. Some offered pitying smiles, others cool stares. Eleanor walked with her chin high, but her heart pounded like a drum. Back home, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at George's photograph. They want me to be small, George, to bow my head and nod. But you always told me love without respect is not love at all. Loretta placed a hand on her shoulder. They can whisper all they want, Ellie. The truth has a way of crawling out from under lies. Daniel's burden. That night, Daniel stood on his apartment balcony, the city lights blurring through his tears. Madison sat inside, scrolling furiously through her phone, calling relatives, weaving her story tighter. But Daniel couldn't breathe under the weight of it anymore. He remembered an incident 6 months ago. Madison had snapped at a waitress, calling her worthless, only to smile sweetly when Daniel returned from the restroom. He remembered her casually suggesting Eleanor sell the house and move into a senior condo so they wouldn't have to worry about her later. And now, he remembered her voice on the patio, cold and mocking, certain his mother was too blind to realize she was being used. The dam inside him cracked. He picked up his phone and typed again. Mom, I need to see you. Alone. Tomorrow evening. There are things I should have told you long ago about Madison. Things that could change everything. He pressed send. This time, he wouldn't back out. The evening in Charleston was warm, heavy with the scent of magnolia and the hum of cicadas. When Daniel's car turned into the driveway, Eleanor Hayes was already waiting on the porch. She stood with her arms crossed, not in anger but in defense, as though bracing herself for a storm. The glow from the porch light cut across her face, revealing every line carved by grief, pride, and exhaustion. Daniel stepped out slowly. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes scuffed from hours of pacing. For a moment, he looked like the boy she had raised alone after George's death, uncertain, carrying burdens too large for his frame. Mom? He said softly. Daniel. The single word trembled between them, neither accusation nor absolution, just the weight of years. Eleanor opened the door, her voice steady despite the shaking in her chest. Come inside. The first words. In the kitchen, 2 mugs sat on the table. One steamed faintly, the scent of chamomile curling in the air. Eleanor had always prepared 2 cups whenever Daniel came, though he rarely finished his. Tonight, it felt more like ritual than hospitality. Daniel sat heavily, his shoulders slumped. His hands fidgeted with the edge of a napkin. I'm sorry, he said finally, for the wedding, for everything, for letting it get this far. Eleanor studied him carefully, searching for sincerity, for the son she had nearly lost. You said you had something to tell me. He nodded, his throat tight. Yes, things I should have told you months ago, maybe years ago. I didn't because I thought I could handle it. I thought love would fix it. Cracks in the mask. He rubbed his eyes, then looked at her with a tired honesty. You remember when I first brought Madison home? She was polite, sweet, charming. You said she was respectful. But there were cracks. I ignored them. The way she treated waiters, snapping when the order wasn't fast enough. The way she rolled her eyes when you told stories about Dad. Once, she said you should let go of the past, that keeping Dad's photo in the living room was depressing. Eleanor inhaled sharply. That photo had been her anchor, the last image of George before cancer took him. Madison had wanted it gone? Yes, Daniel said, noticing her reaction. I defended you, but only weakly. I told myself it was nerves, that she'd adjust. But deep down, I knew it was something else, contempt. Why didn't you tell me? Eleanor asked quietly. Because I wanted her to fit, Daniel admitted. I wanted a family again. After Claire died, I was lonely, broken. Madison filled that emptiness. I didn't want to see the cracks. The money trail. He reached into his pocket and slid a folded receipt across the table. Eleanor picked it up, scanning the charges. Designer boutiques, spas, expensive dinners. She opened a credit line, Daniel said bitterly. In my name. Told me it was for emergencies. But she spent thousands. When I confronted her, she cried, said it was all for the wedding, for me, that she wanted to be perfect, and I believed her, or maybe I wanted to believe her. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the receipt. Daniel, that's fraud. That's manipulation. I know, he whispered, and I let it go. Flashbacks of a son. Eleanor's mind spun, dragging her back to memories she had buried. Daniel at 16, working weekends to save for his first car. Daniel at 22, paying off his college loans with relentless discipline. Her son had been careful, responsible. For him to ignore financial recklessness now, it wasn't love alone. It was desperation. She saw it clearly. Madison had found Daniel's wounds and pressed her fingers into them, molding him with guilt and flattery until he bent. Her chest ached. You let her do this to you, and you let her do it to me. Daniel's head bowed. I know, and I hate myself for it. The shadow outside. The clock ticked loudly, the sound filling the silence. Then came the crunch of gravel outside. Eleanor stiffened. Daniel stood and parted the curtain just enough to see. A figure moved near the hedge, slender, deliberate. The porch light caught a flash of auburn hair. Madison? Eleanor whispered. Daniel's jaw clenched. She must have followed me. They froze, listening. The shadow lingered for a moment, then drifted toward the street. A car engine purred to life in the distance. She knows, Daniel muttered. She'll twist this into something else. Eleanor's pulse thundered. For years, her home had been a sanctuary. Now, even here, Madison's presence slithered. The hidden past. Daniel sat again, his voice low, urgent. Mom, there's more. Madison told me once about an incident at her old job in Atlanta. She worked at a financial firm. She said her boss was cruel, misogynistic, drove her out. But later, Audrey joked like it was gossip that Madison nearly got sued, something about mismanaging client funds. When I asked, Madison swore it was nothing, just rumors. She cried, begged me to trust her, and I did. Eleanor leaned forward. Do you think it's true? Daniel hesitated. After everything, I'm not sure what's true anymore, but I can't shake the feeling that she's hiding more than sharp words, that she's dangerous. Eleanor's heart sank. Madison wasn't just selfish. She might be reckless enough to destroy more than reputations. A mother's wound. The truth hurt Eleanor more than the betrayal itself. Her son had seen signs, and he had stayed silent. She rose, pacing the kitchen, her robe brushing against the floor. Daniel, all this time you knew. You knew she disrespected me. You knew she was reckless, and still you defended her when she called me selfish. He flinched as if struck. I was blind. Or maybe I didn't want to see. I thought protecting her meant protecting us. I thought if I kept peace, everything would hold together. But it only made me complicit. Eleanor turned, eyes shining. And now you come to me, asking for help to clean up the mess she made? Daniel swallowed hard. No, I'm asking for forgiveness and for strength, because I don't know how to fight her alone. A pact. The silence stretched. Then Eleanor sat again, her hand covering his. The years of hurt didn't vanish, but something steadied in her chest. Then we face her together, she said. No more silence, no more shadows. Whatever truth she's hiding, we drag it into the light. Daniel's grip tightened. "If we do this, Mom, it could destroy my marriage." Eleanor's voice was soft but firm. "Better a broken marriage than a broken soul." The warning. The night pressed close against the windows. The cicadas hummed like a warning chorus. Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face blanching. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. He turned the phone toward her. A message from Audrey. "Daniel, you need to talk to me before Madison finds out. There are things about her past in Atlanta you don't know. If you don't act soon, it won't just be Eleanor who pays the price." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Audrey, the same sister who had laughed at her, was now reaching out, sounding desperate. "Why would she warn us?" Eleanor whispered. Daniel's voice was hoarse. "Because maybe even Audrey knows how dangerous Madison really is." The cafe on the corner of Main Street was the kind of place people came to for comfort. The scent of roasted beans lingered thick in the air. Jazz hummed from a scratched vinyl record in the background, and the soft chatter of regulars created a fragile cocoon of normalcy. Yet, for Eleanor Fitzgerald, Daniel, and Audrey Collins, the atmosphere felt anything but normal. The three sat in a booth near the back, their voices hushed, their eyes scanning the door every time it opened as if Madison herself might appear, all smiles and venom. Eleanor wrapped her hands around a mug of chamomile tea, though she hadn't touched it. She felt the heat in her palms but tasted only the metallic tang of dread. Daniel sat beside her, shoulders slumped, his hands knotted together so tightly his knuckles whitened. Across from them, Audrey lifted her coffee cup with a trembling hand. She had agreed to meet Eleanor only after hours of persuasion, insisting she wanted nothing more to do with Madison. Now, under the yellow light of the cafe, she looked like a woman who had finally reached the end of her silence. "You don't know what she's capable of," Audrey whispered, her eyes darting toward the barista as if even he might be listening. "Madison doesn't just manipulate. She destroys. She leaves nothing but wreckage." Daniel leaned forward, his voice a strained rasp. "Tell us what happened in Atlanta. We need to understand. I need to understand. Before it's too late." Audrey hesitated. She pressed her napkin flat against the table, her fingers fidgeting with its edges. For a long moment she said nothing, then her voice dropped into a confessional tone. 3 years ago, Madison was working as a project coordinator for a mid-size construction firm in Atlanta. It was supposed to be a temporary role, but she made herself indispensable. She charmed the managers, brought muffins for the office, remembered everyone's birthday. They loved her. She even convinced the CEO, Charles Whitaker, that she was his right hand. But it was all part of her game. Audrey paused, her eyes glazing as if watching a film only she could see. There was this man, a contractor named Glenn Myers. He was quiet, older than most, and everyone respected him. Madison, she zeroed in on him, flattered him, made him feel special. Before long, she convinced him to sign off on purchase orders he barely read. Inflated invoices, fake subcontractors, kickbacks that led straight to her. Eleanor's chest tightened. She remembered Madison's charm, the way she laughed at the dinner table, making everyone feel chosen, adored. The very same charm she had used in Atlanta. Audrey went on. When the scheme started to unravel, she shifted blame. She claimed Glenn had coerced her, said she was too young and scared to refuse. She even produced doctored emails, God knows how she forged them. Glenn lost everything, his reputation, his job, his health. Last I heard, he was living in a trailer outside the city, barely surviving. Madison walked away clean, with a new identity lined up. She told everyone she was the victim, the poor woman tricked by a predator. Audrey's lip trembled. And the worst part? People believed her. Daniel dropped his head into his hands. His voice cracked. "Oh, God, that's what she does. That's exactly what she's been doing to me. She twists things until I'm the villain, and she's the martyr. I should have seen it sooner." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. Her son's despair was unbearable, but beneath it flickered something new: recognition, awakening. Audrey's voice hardened. "You must be careful. If she feels cornered, she'll strike harder. In Atlanta, she threatened to accuse Glenn of harassment. She hinted she'd go to the press, ruin his family. The man's wife left him before the truth even surfaced. Madison doesn't just ruin reputations. She ruins lives." Silence fell heavy across the booth. Outside, cars passed, their headlights slanting through the cafe window like fleeting spotlights on an unspoken truth. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes wet but sharp. "So what do we do? How do we stop her?" Audrey hesitated again. Then she reached into her purse, pulling out a small flash drive sealed in a plastic bag. She slid it across the table. "This is everything I kept from Atlanta. Copies of invoices, old emails, notes Glenn sent me before he disappeared. I thought I was keeping them for my own safety, in case Madison ever came after me. But maybe this is your proof." Eleanor stared at the flash drive as if it were a live grenade. Proof. The one thing Madison could not manipulate. Before she could speak, Daniel's phone buzzed violently on the table. The screen lit up with a name that made his stomach clench. Madison. He froze. The phone vibrated again, relentless, like a snake rattling its tail. Finally, with a trembling hand, he answered. Her voice came sweet, syrupy, almost playful. "Daniel, darling, why haven't you answered my calls? I've been worried." His throat dried. "Worried? About what?" There was a pause, then a laugh that slid like ice down his spine. "About you, of course. About us. I heard you've been meeting with people who don't wish us well. You wouldn't be hiding anything from me, would you?" Eleanor and Audrey exchanged a glance. Madison's tone was light, but the undercurrent was unmistakable, a warning, a threat. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do," Madison whispered. "Be careful who you trust, Daniel. Some people are very good at twisting stories. You wouldn't want to end up like poor Glenn Myers, would you?" The line went dead. Daniel sat motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, his face drained of all color. Eleanor reached for his hand. "She knows," he whispered. "She knows we're digging." Audrey's hands shook as she clutched her coffee cup. "This is what I meant. She always knows." For the next half hour, they spoke in fragments, their conversation broken by long silences and stolen glances at the door. Eleanor pressed for details. Audrey offered what she remembered: names of co-workers, dates of suspicious transfers, whispered conversations in hallways. Each piece painted Madison not as an opportunist but as a predator, deliberate and ruthless. Finally, Audrey leaned in, lowering her voice until it was barely audible. "There's something else you need to know. Madison never worked alone. In Atlanta, she had help. Someone on the inside who fed her information, cleared her path, made sure her tracks were covered. Without him, she couldn't have pulled it off." Daniel frowned. "Who?" Audrey's eyes flicked toward the window, as if the night itself might overhear her. "I only learned his name once, by accident, but when I heard it again recently, I realized he's here. He's been in your life all along." Eleanor leaned forward, her pulse hammering. "Who is he, Audrey? Who?" Audrey's lips parted, but no sound came. She hesitated, her eyes filling with fear, then darted toward the door just as it opened, and a figure stepped inside. The cafe's chatter died for Eleanor in that instant. She couldn't tell if the man was a stranger or someone she knew, but Audrey's face drained of color. Her hands clutched the edge of the table as if to anchor herself. Daniel followed her gaze, his voice breaking. "Audrey, is it him?" Audrey's whisper was barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. "Yes, and if he's here, it means Madison already knows everything." The man who had just walked into the cafe seemed utterly ordinary. He wore a navy jacket, his hair neatly combed, his expression calm. He could have been a teacher finishing late grading or a salesman grabbing coffee before heading home. Yet the way Audrey froze, the way her coffee cup rattled in her trembling hand, told Eleanor this was no ordinary man. Daniel stared, recognition dawning slowly like the sun burning through fog. "No," his voice cracked. "That can't be." Audrey cut him off with a harsh whisper. "Don't say his name. Not here." The man ordered an espresso, his tone casual, his posture relaxed, but then his eyes swept the cafe and landed on their booth. It was only for a second, a glance no different from any stranger scanning the room. Still, it pierced Eleanor like a blade. He knew who they were, and more importantly, why they were here. Audrey pressed her napkin to her mouth, muttering behind it. "That's Madison's inside man. Back in Atlanta, they called him the cleaner. He was the one who wiped her tracks, shredded documents, made evidence vanish. Without him, she wouldn't have survived half the schemes she pulled, Daniel whispered hoarsely. But who is he to us? Audrey's lips trembled. You already know, Daniel. He's been circling your family for years. Eleanor's pulse pounded. Pieces shifted in her mind, odd phone calls, unexplained favors, the way certain problems disappeared without effort. She had dismissed them as coincidences, moments of luck. But nothing with Madison was coincidence. The man picked up his espresso, turned toward the door, then paused. For one agonizing second, he looked back at their booth. His eyes met Eleanor's, calm, unreadable, as if daring her to speak his name. Then he walked out into the night. The silence he left behind felt heavier than his presence. Daniel exhaled shakily. We can't stay here. If he saw us together. He did, Eleanor said flatly, and he'll tell Madison. They left the cafe quickly, splitting up at the corner as Audrey insisted. If we're seen leaving together, it'll confirm everything. I'll be in touch tomorrow. She slipped into the crowd, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared, leaving Eleanor and Daniel alone under the buzzing streetlight. Back at Eleanor's house, the air felt stifling. The walls seemed to lean closer, the photos of happier days glaring down with silent judgment. Daniel paced the living room, hands tugging at his hair. I should have known, he muttered. The times when Madison seemed untouchable, when every problem magically resolved, it wasn't just her. She had him. She's been planning every move like a chess game. And his voice broke. I was her pawn. Eleanor forced herself to stay steady. Not anymore. Audrey gave us proof. The flash drive might be the only weapon we have left. Daniel stopped pacing. His eyes met hers, filled with despair. Do you really think we can use it? Against her? Against him? Eleanor hesitated. The logical answer was yes, they had evidence. But deep down, she knew Madison played in shadows where truth was fragile, where proof could vanish. Still, surrendering was no option. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, the flash drive clutched in her hand. Images replayed Madison's smile at family dinners, Daniel's slow unraveling, Audrey's haunted confession. And now this cleaner, silently watching, promising retribution with a glance. At dawn, a text arrived on Daniel's phone. It was from Madison. Good morning, love. I know where you were last night. Secrets don't keep forever. Come home, and let's talk like a family, or shall I share my own version of the truth with the world? Daniel stared at the message, his face pale. Eleanor read over his shoulder. The trap was tightening. We have to make the first move, Eleanor said firmly, before she controls the story again. By afternoon, Audrey arrived at Eleanor's house, her face drawn but determined. I thought about it all night, she admitted. Running isn't an option anymore. If Madison's man is already circling, it means she's preparing her strike. The only chance you have is to expose her before she exposes you, Daniel asked, almost desperate. Expose her how? Go to the police? The media? Audrey shook her head. Not yet. Madison has friends everywhere, people who owe her favors, but there's one man who might listen, the same CEO she manipulated back in Atlanta, Charles Whitaker. He lost millions because of her. If we bring him this evidence, he won't bury it. He'll want revenge. The word hung in the room like a loaded gun. Revenge. Eleanor tightened her grip on the flash drive. She had always believed in justice, in dignity, but now she realized that sometimes justice and revenge walked the same path. The meeting with Charles Whitaker was arranged 2 nights later, in a dimly lit office above a shuttered warehouse. The man who greeted them was older now, his once powerful frame stooped, his face carved by bitterness. I swore I'd never hear that woman's name again, Whitaker said, pouring himself a drink. But when Audrey called, I knew it wasn't over. Madison doesn't let go. She multiplies. Daniel placed the flash drive on the table. This is what she left behind in Atlanta. Emails, invoices, proof she wasn't the victim, proof Glenn Myers was destroyed because of her lies. Whitaker's eyes flickered with recognition, with rage. He plugged the drive into his laptop, scrolling through the files. His hands trembled, but not from age. These are the documents I was told had been destroyed. How the hell did you... Doesn't matter, Audrey cut in. What matters is what you do with them now. Whitaker closed the laptop with a snap. You don't know what you're stepping into. Madison doesn't just cheat. She binds people. Politicians, investors, contractors. They all owe her something. Exposing her means dragging them down too. You'll make powerful enemies. Daniel leaned forward, his voice raw. Then tell me, what's the alternative? Let her keep destroying people? Let her keep destroying me? Whitaker studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile crept across his face, thin, cruel. Maybe it's time someone gave Madison a taste of her own medicine. For the first time in weeks, Daniel seemed to breathe freely. They had an ally, a plan, a way forward. Yet Eleanor couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. She remembered the man in the cafe, the cleaner. If Madison had him, she would already know about this meeting. Her fears proved true. That night, as they left the warehouse, Eleanor's headlights illuminated a car parked across the street. A figure sat inside, motionless, watching. When Eleanor blinked, the car started, pulling away into the darkness. Daniel cursed under his breath. She knows. Back home, Eleanor found an envelope wedged under her door. No address, no stamp, just her name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single photograph. The three of them at the cafe, Audrey's face pale, Daniel leaning in, Eleanor's eyes wide. Beneath it, a note in Madison's neat handwriting. Careful, Eleanor. Secrets have consequences. Some of us don't survive them. Eleanor's knees nearly gave way. The war had begun. For days, they prepared in silence. Whitaker promised to contact a journalist he trusted, someone fearless enough to print the truth. Daniel stayed at Eleanor's house, too afraid to return to Madison. Audrey checked in daily, though every time she glanced over her shoulder, expecting the cleaner to emerge from the shadows. And then, one evening, Daniel's phone rang again. Madison. He almost ignored it, but then, against Eleanor's protests, he answered. Her voice was calm, almost tender. Daniel, love, I forgive you. I know you're confused, but think of your mother. Think of Audrey. Do you really want them to suffer for your mistakes? Daniel's voice shook. You're the one who ruined Glenn. You're the one who's been using me. It's over, Madison. A long silence. Then, softly, if you believe that, meet me tomorrow. Alone. I'll give you the truth, but if you bring anyone else, I promise you'll regret it. The line clicked dead. Daniel dropped the phone, his hands trembling. Eleanor stared at him, horror clawing at her chest. She wants to meet, he said hoarsely. She says she'll give me the truth. Audrey paled. It's a trap. It's always a trap. Eleanor clenched her fists. She had fought too long, come too far, to let Madison win now. But the question burned in her mind, relentless as the ticking of a clock. What if Madison really was ready to reveal something none of them were prepared to hear?